Hello! Are you someone who wants to read more in your life? Do you wish that you had more time in the day to fit in more reading? Or are you someone who is too scared to increase the speed on your audiobook because you are afraid of not being able to understand or enjoy the chipmunk speed? Then hopefully this video will be for you. So I'm going to be sharing 6 tips that personally worked for me to be able to become someone who routinely listens to audiobooks at 2+ speed, when a few years ago I would have never even dreamed of touching that dial. And now I'm someone who rarely listens to audiobooks at regular speed. So if you want to learn some of the things that I've gone through in that process, then just keep watching. Now, first, I think it's good to ground ourselves in some numbers that hopefully will help you wrap your head around the fact that increasing your audiobook speed is not something to be afraid of. It's something that your brain can fully handle, and let's get into those. Now, I found a study that looked at 1.6 million TV radio broadcasts. Basically, it analyzed the speed that radio broadcasters spoke. And on average, across those millions of broadcasts, the average speed was 154 words per minute. Now, there are different exact numbers that you can find, but most of the things I read said that about 150 words per minute is the typical speaking rate for English speakers. So how does that compare to how fast people read? I found 2 different sources that I want to talk about. The first one was a study of different languages, and basically it talked about how fast people read in different languages. And for English, the average reader read about 228 words per minute. Now, compare that to some other sources that say the typical reading speed of an English reader is about 300 words per minute, all the way up to 600 words per minute for people who are doing a lot of reading. So I think that should be reassuring because it tells us that most people are already reading and absorbing content at a much faster rate than they would be if they were just listening to someone speak at only 150 words per minute. So first, just absorb that and know that your brain is fully capable of reading at increased speeds. Obviously, you do not have to read at higher speeds. There are times when I just want to kind of stop and smell the roses, if you will, when I'm listening to a book. However, if you are like me and there's just a growing pile of books that you want to read and just less and less time in the day to read them, then I feel like these tips could be beneficial to you to actually be able to fit more books into the short time that we have each and every day to read. So tip number 1 is to start slowly. If your goal is to get up to 2 times speed and you just jump right there, I guarantee you are not going to have an enjoyable reading experience. You really do need to start yourself slowly and ramp up slowly over time. Personally, I found that 1.25 speed, which is available on Audible, is almost indistinguishable from 1 point speed because it still sounds like a normal rate of speech that someone would talk in. But I would still recommend starting at 1.25 speed and listen to a full audiobook at that speed before you start ramping up. I think that is the best way to get started. Now, the second tip is similar to the first tip, but it's something that I think even more advanced speed listeners can benefit from. And that is when you start a new book, start at a slower speed. Even if you were used to reading or listening at 2.5 speed, when you start a new book, start at 1 time speed or 1.25 speed until you get a sense of the characters, the setting, and the core, elements of the story that will make it easier to read faster later on. So maybe read the first chapter at 1 time speed, the second chapter at 1.25 speed, all the way up until your desired speed. Personally, I found that even when I'm reading just print books, I still read slower at the beginning when I'm just getting a hang of things. So I think it's no different, and you should set the expectation that it's going to be harder to listen to faster speeds at the very beginning. Okay, the third tip I have is to listen with headphones. I don't know exactly why this is, but I have found that when I'm listening to faster speeds, especially above like 1.75 or above 2.0 speed, it becomes harder to make out all the different words if I'm just listening to my phone without any headphones. I think having the words spoken more directly into your ear honestly does help you focus in on those words and helps you distinguish between them. So that's my third tip. My fourth tip is to try to read a physical copy of the text at the same time that you're listening to the increased speed. I think a lot of times when you start listening to things at higher speeds, it can sound really fast. However, once you actually open up the book and read along with the spoken word, you realize that it's actually not going that fast, and it may actually seem kind of slow because, as I said at the beginning of this video, we typically read a lot faster than people speak. So once you actually kind of see that for yourself, you start to understand the words a little bit better. And personally, I found this is a great way to just ramp up that reading speed, and it's actually a good way to kind of increase your physical reading speed as well. If you ramp up the listening speed up to like 2.5, 3 times speed, it's a great way to start reading faster in physical books as well. Now, my fifth tip is to, as much as possible, minimize distractions from your reading environment when you are practicing reading at higher speeds. When you are reading at 2 times speed, there's double the amount of information coming in every second of the audiobook. So if you take your attention away from your book for 30 seconds, you're missing potentially a lot of content. So obviously this is probably true of any reading, but I think a lot of people get used to listening to audiobooks while they're doing other things. And especially when you're first starting, it's really best to try to avoid that until you get to the point where you're more used to listening to the increased speeds. It will be so much easier to understand what's going on. Okay, and my sixth and final tip is don't be afraid to change the narration speed based on the type of material as well as the narrator. Every audiobook narrator is different. Some people who are narrators are just like sloth speakers, and some people just naturally have a faster reading speed. You need to be able to adjust to the different narrations, which is kind of why I suggested at the beginning, start a book out at a 1.0 narration speed or 1.25 and then adjust from there. There's no shame in listening to something at a lower speed, but you also don't want to be limiting yourself to a lower speed because you think you can't handle the higher speeds, even if you wish you could get through the book faster. So don't be afraid to play around and adjust the speeds. You'll also probably find that different genres kind of lend themselves to different narration speeds. Personally, I found that most like self-help books and nonfiction books that are more geared towards like how-to kind of things, normally I can get away with reading those at a lot faster audiobook speeds because they tend to repeat themselves often. They tend to speak in more simple sentences. Like it just tends to lend itself more to faster reading speeds. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, if I'm reading like literary fiction that has a lot of like underlying themes and things that you really don't want to miss, then it may be better to start with slower speeds to make sure you're fully understanding what is going on. That's my best tip. That's it. If you like videos about books and reading, as well as some reviews and reading hacks of how to get the most out of your reading experience, then come join me on this channel. That's what I talk about here. And that's it. See you next time. Bye.